It was a quiet autumn evening when my life began to shift in ways I couldn't yet understand. I had just turned 19, freshly uprooted from my childhood home after my parents' messy separation. My mother remarried within months, and we moved into her new husband's sprawling house on the edge of town, a place that felt more like a museum than a home. The halls were wide and echoing, the rooms tastefully decorated but cold, and the family I inherited was polite yet distant. I kept mostly to myself, retreating to the small room at the end of the upstairs corridor. It was the farthest from the others, which suited me fine. In this house, I felt like an intruder, too quiet, too invisible. But there was one person who noticed me. My step-uncle, Faris, lived in the house as well. He was my stepfather's younger brother, 10 or 12 years older than me, with an air of quiet confidence and a watchful gaze. Everyone in the family seemed to either overlook or dismiss him. He didn't attend the fancy dinners. He didn't weigh in on arguments. He kept to himself, except when it came to me. It started with little things. A gentle nod in the hallway, a murmured, "How was your day?" when no one else bothered to ask. His voice was low and calm, his smile faint but warm, and though his presence was understated, it carried a weight that drew my attention. One rainy night, not long after I moved in, I was curled up in bed trying to drown out the muffled laughter and clinking glasses from downstairs. The family was hosting yet another dinner party, one I'd been excused from attending. My room was dark, the windows streaked with rainwater, when I heard a soft knock. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then it came again, 2 quiet taps, hesitant but deliberate. I swung my legs out of bed and padded to the door. When I opened it, Faris stood there, one hand braced on the frame, his dark eyes fixed on mine. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. I shook my head, unsure what to say. He gave a faint smile and tilted his head toward the hallway. "Come with me for a minute. Just to talk. You look like you need it." Against my better judgment, though at the time, it didn't feel like a judgment at all, I followed him. His footsteps were silent on the carpet, his presence oddly comforting. His room was next door to mine, dimly lit, smelling faintly of cedarwood. He gestured for me to sit at the edge of his bed, and I did, hands clasped in my lap. He crouched in front of me, resting his hand gently over mine. "I know you feel alone here," he murmured, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "But you're not. Not as long as I'm around." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten, part fear, part something else I couldn't name. And as the rain fell harder outside, I realized I had no idea where this quiet kindness was leading me. That night left me restless. Long after I returned to my own room, his words echoed in my mind. "You're not alone, not as long as I'm around." It was the first time since moving here that I felt seen, and the feeling was as unsettling as it was comforting. Over the next few days, Faris's quiet attention became impossible to ignore. He started leaving little notes for me, slipped between the pages of the books I left on the living room table. "Hope today is better." Or, "Meet me in the garden after dinner?" His thoughtfulness caught me off guard. No one else in the house even noticed when I skipped meals or disappeared into my room. When I met him in the garden that evening, he was already there, leaning against the stone wall, waiting. The garden lights cast a golden glow over his face, softening his sharp features. He handed me a paper bag, my favorite chocolate biscuits. "How did you know?" I asked, surprised. He gave a faint, amused smile. "I pay attention. That's all." We sat on the cool bench, eating in silence as the sky faded into night. He didn't say much, and yet it felt like he understood more than anyone ever had. That became our routine. Little by little, he pulled me into his quiet world, an escape from the chill of the rest of the family. Some nights, he'd call me into the den to watch old movies on his laptop. He'd sit closer each time, his arm draped along the back of the couch, fingers occasionally brushing my shoulder. When I shifted nervously, he'd murmur, "Relax. It's just me." It didn't feel wrong, at least not at first. Then came the night he came to my room. I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, when I heard his familiar knock. He slipped inside before I could answer, closing the door softly behind him. "You're still awake," he said, more observation than question. I sat up, hugging my knees, unsure of what to say. He crossed the room in 2 strides and sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes studying me. You've been quiet lately, he murmured, his hand reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. Tell me what's on your mind. My voice caught in my throat, but he didn't seem to expect an answer. His fingers lingered at my cheek, trailing down to my hand. You don't have to be scared, he said. I'd never hurt you. He stood then, holding out his hand. And just like the first time, I followed him. In the dim light of his room, he lay back on the bed, pulling me down beside him. His arm wrapped around my shoulders as he whispered, You're mine now, don't forget that. I didn't know then that those words weren't a promise. They were a warning. Weeks passed, and our late-night encounters became a quiet, unspoken ritual. I no longer hesitated when I heard his knock. I no longer questioned the soft words he whispered, or the way his hand lingered against mine. In the darkness, it felt almost like love, something tender and fragile, something only we shared. But in the daylight, everything felt different. During the day, Faris barely looked at me. At breakfast, he sat across the table, reading the newspaper, his face expressionless, as if we were strangers. Around the family, he never so much as glanced my way. If anything, he seemed more distant than before, as though acknowledging me in public would undo everything that happened at night. The confusion gnawed at me. I told myself he was just being careful. But doubt crept in when I saw how easily he smiled at others, at a visiting cousin, a young woman who came to stay for the weekend. I watched from across the room as he leaned close to her, murmuring something that made her laugh, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. That laugh pierced something in me. That night, when he came to my door, I hesitated for the first time. I stayed still, hoping he would just go away. But after a moment, he let himself in anyway, closing the door behind him with quiet finality. You're upset, he said flatly, as though it were a nuisance. I finally spoke what had been clawing at me for days. You told me I was yours, but you flirt with her when I'm right there. Do I even mean anything to you? He sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed, without looking at me. Don't get carried away, he muttered. You care too much. Just enjoy it while it lasts. His words were like ice water. I stared at him, my chest tightening with a hurt so sharp it stole my breath. The romantic illusion I'd clung to shattered in that moment, replaced by the cold truth. I'd never been anything more than a secret. That night, I couldn't bring myself to follow him back to his room. He left without another word, and I sat awake for hours, staring at the moonlight spilling across the floor, trying to reconcile the man who made me feel special with the one who so easily dismissed me. It was then I began to understand what his kindness really was. Not love, but control. Not affection, but manipulation. And yet, even with the truth sinking in, I couldn't quite let go. Not yet. After that night, something shifted inside me. The words he'd thrown so carelessly, just enjoy it while it lasts, echoed every time I saw him. What I once mistook for love now felt suffocating, heavy with shame. I began to avoid him. At dinner, I kept my eyes down. In the hallway, I slipped into another room if I heard his footsteps. At night, I locked my door and pressed my back against it when his knock came. At first he knocked longer, calling my name in a low, insistent voice. Then he stopped altogether. Days turned into weeks. His indifference cut deeper than his attention ever had. I would catch glimpses of him laughing with others, whispering to yet another visiting cousin. It hurt, but it also clarified what I hadn't wanted to see before. I was never special. I was simply convenient. One evening, I sat alone on the back steps, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. My mother came outside, frowning softly as she sat next to me. You've been quiet lately, she said, touching my arm. Is something wrong? I opened my mouth, then closed it. The words felt heavy, lodged in my chest. But something in her eyes, some faint trace of the mother I used to trust, gave me courage. I don't feel safe here, I finally whispered. I want to leave. Her expression darkened, but she didn't press for details. She only nodded. Then we'll figure something out. A week later, I moved into my grandmother's house. It was smaller, older, but full of warmth. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without fear of hearing a knock. Alone in my new room, I unpacked my diary and flipped through the pages filled with his name, his words, the promises that now read like lies. I set my pen to a fresh page and began to write. When someone says they care about you, watch how they treat you when no one's watching. Love doesn't hide in the dark. Love doesn't make you feel ashamed. I know that now. The memory of his hand on mine still stung, but it no longer defined me. Little by little, I began to forgive myself for believing him, for mistaking his control for affection, for staying quiet too long. I vowed never to let anyone make me feel small again.